cat jam in the car. Hey guys, now we have a new guest today, Geoff Ryan.
Hello.
Geoff is a special guest here. Hi Geoff, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Geoff Ryan. I'm a filmmaker and in Los Angeles.
Yeah, Geoff and I met years ago at this downtown LA film festival. I think you were in the panel talk about the new film you just did, right?
Yeah.
Geoff is amazing film director, and his work is just so great. We did a short film a couple years ago because I admire his work. I would love to work with him. And Geoff also had his own film, went to the Cannes, right? Please tell us that film. I saw some trailer. It looks amazing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, I got to correct. It wasn't technically at the Cannes Film Festival. It was at the Cannes Film Market. So,
okay.
Which the distributors took it there to pitch it and sell it. I wish it'd gotten into Cannes, but we actually skipped the festival circuit for that one. But it's a weird vampire drama, horror, western, neo-noir, thriller. We could never decide on what genre it is, but yeah, it was just tried to make something different, thought-provoking, fun, funny, dark. It's vampire, so of course it's gory, and yeah, it seemed to go over well. People seem to like it, even though it's very, very strange. We got a really great reception, both critically and audiences, so I was quite proud of that.
Yeah, because I always like Geoff, like your camera work is just so good at that, and then the film was shot beautifully.
Oh, thank you.
So where can they saw the film, like right now?
I mean, it's online. You can obviously buy the DVD, Blu-ray, all that sort of stuff, but it's online. Of course, Amazon, Tubi, Vudu. You can even rent it on the distributor has like a YouTube channel, so you can rent it there. It's on a number of other platforms I should remember, but I can't think of them off the top of my head.
Right.
But you search for it. It's called Blood from Stone, yeah, it's if you want something different, fun, weird, hopefully thought-provoking. I like it. Obviously, I made it.
Yeah. So you also write this film?
Yeah.
And then right.
Yeah, wrote it, directed it. I was the DP, cinematographer, and edited it. So yeah.
So you did everything on your own from
had a lot.
writing, directing, cinematographer.
Yeah. It was the first feature I've ever done the cinematography on, so that was a nice challenge. Really had a distinct idea for how it was supposed to be shot. Everything from, obviously storyboarded it, shot listed it, but yeah, tried to really create something that didn't, story-wise, I wanted to make something very different from other films, but then also aesthetically and artistically, I wanted it to feel very different than what people are typically getting right now. I wanted it to have a very distinct look and style to it. It's it's a smaller budget film, so it doesn't have the glitz and glamour of a big Hollywood film, but it does have, I think, a distinct voice, a distinct idea to it. The shots, very non-traditional visual storytelling. There's not a lot of big establishing shots. It's much more keeps you kind of in the flow of things. It doesn't have a very scene sort of feel. It's almost got a montage of mosaic type of vibe where it's this constant flow of events instead of scene. So yeah, I tried to really create something distinct and original feeling.
So you mean like you more focus on storytelling, right?
Yeah, it's definitely very storytelling, and also just very visceral, trying to really get into the feeling. Even though it's about vampires, it doesn't necessarily have to be distant from our own experience. In fact, a lot of the characters are based on my own personal experiences, people I've known, and so I wanted it to really have this sense of, we're all dealing with issues of whether it's the big picture ideas of mortality to smaller things like just what is our purpose here, why are we here, what are we doing, issues of being a creative but also in a society where we cause destruction, whether it's the food we eat, whether it's relationships we have, and finding that balance between being a creator and a destroyer, and how someone who may be a vampire but has in their in their inside they want to be somebody who creates and builds. How do they reconcile those two? And so for somebody like myself who lives in LA, where you're constantly consuming and constantly, you know, basically taking in all this stuff, it's kind of an act of destroying. How do you reconcile your morals, your values with this lifestyle that you're living? And what do you do to try and find a reason for you to be on this planet consuming and destroying when, you want to be a productive and creative member of this planet and this society? So try to deal with some heavy themes like that, but in a fun way.
Okay.
Without it being too like heavy-handed and too philosophical. It's much more, you get to know these characters who are having these issues, but then seeing them try to reconcile or to try and fail at times makes for a fun story. I like to think, at least.
So is that why you decided to tell the story with the vampires characters instead,
Yeah.
right?
It is. I'd had this vampire idea floating in my head for a long time, but there's so many vampire movies. There's,
Right. Yeah.
1,000 of them that come out every year, and there's so many really good ones. Initial early idea I had was to do a vampire satire, like a comedic vampire film, and then What We Do in the Shadows came out, and it's like, well, I can't top that. That's as good as you're gonna do. And so you have that one, and then you have Only Lovers Left Alive, or you have Let the Right One In. These really artistic, thoughtful vampire films, and you have some of the classics, of course. And so, really took a while to find that distinct concept that I think could really make it a valuable story. Like, for people who love vampire films, it's still enjoyable, but for those who may feel like it's been overdone, did it bring something original? And it took a while to finally, for that to happen. It kind of happened sort of just, life took an interesting turn. My grandfather, in his later years, was, dealing with alcoholism, depression, and kind of just didn't want to be here anymore. And when he passed, I remember having, these conversations with family and just thinking back on his life and just this idea of not wanting to be here, but physically still being here. And so that kind of inspired sort of this main character. And some of the initial ideas I'd had for this story was actually an alcoholic vampire. And obviously, as a vampire, they can't process alcohol, so he has to get his victims really drunk.
Okay.
And so it kind of fed into that. And I don't mean to disparage my lovely grandfather, who was a kind person, but to take that idea of somebody who is depressed, who doesn't know why they're still on this planet, feels like their era is long past, that they, this guy that they always believed they were no longer had a place here. And so what does he do? He drowns his sorrows, he drowns his depression in alcohol and drugs, but in order to do that, he has to get his victims really messed up, which lends to some of the fun in the film. Is he's constantly getting his, he's out at bars, and there's a scene where he ends up taking a ride share because he doesn't drive, and the passengers in the car with him are drunk, and things go crazy from there. And then he ends up driving a rideshare, picking up drunk people, and it all takes place in Las Vegas as well, which adds to the debauchery and the craziness of it. So
yeah, because I remember you shot the whole film in Vegas, right?
Yeah, we did about 80% of it in Vegas. We did a little bit in Laughlin, Nevada, and then we did a few scenes actually here in LA, just like interiors, things, like an apartment scene or a hotel scene type of thing, like the interior. But yeah, we shot at, various casinos in Vegas, the El Cortez, the Plaza. We shot at the Atomic Liquors, which is an awesome bar. It's where back in the early days when they were testing the nuclear bombs, people used to go up on top of Atomic Liquors, drink cocktails, and watch the missile tests, the explosions. And so it's I figured what better place to start the film. That's the opening scene, is at Atomic Liquors, and just symbolically this film about these destructive beings, and an opening scene takes place at a bar where people used to watch the nuclear bomb tests. And it deals a little bit also on like a deeper level with that, these beings that have been here for hundreds of years, who have witnessed so much destruction from empires rising and colonization and wars and all of that, and they have this very detached view of it, and yet it kind of gets into their own violence and how the violence that they've inflicted on other people has made them much more isolated, much more paranoid. They're now in a society where they have to be careful, they have to be cautious, because there's technology now. There's not, they can't just blame it on mythology and folklore and people's superstitions when, say, a village gets annihilated by vampires. Now they have to be cautious, and so it gets into that idea of how their past violence has now created a very precarious world for them to live in, and which I also tried symbolically. I think it lends itself to some sort of contemplation about our own role. I mean, not maybe individually, but our own role in the actions of whether it be our country or the history of our own peoples or whatever, and how our lives have benefited from past violence, and yet that also lends to a lot of instability that we face today. So, again, try to do something that was thoughtful, but doing it in a fun way where you don't feel like you're being preached. If you want to think heavy, you can.
Yeah.
If you just want to watch vampires go on killing sprees, you can also do that.
Yeah, I think that's like the charm of filmmaking, right? As a filmmaker, you tell a story. Like earlier you mentioned about it, this film has fall into so many different categories, right? Could be a vampire, could be like horror, could be like. Do you think that is kind of the direction like lots of films are going?
Yeah.
Nowadays, because like last night, obviously it's a Golden Globe, and this movie Michelle Yeoh won the Best Actress for Everything Everywhere All at Once, and then she also talked about that, how when she just got the script, it's like all kinds of categories, not just action, because she always does action film, right? And then the two directors wrote the script, just like you, it's like writer, director, right?
Daniels are awesome.
Yeah, two Daniels. Yeah, like the concept is like, it's like a sci-fi or it's comedy. It is also action, right?
Well, they're masters of that. I mean, every film they've done, it's unclassifiable, and that was one thing. Honestly, I was it makes it hard to market a film. Because you can't just say, oh, it's for this audience or it's for that audience, but it can. I think a lot more films are going that way because being neatly boxed into a genre feels a little bit limiting, and also it's there's so many stories that have been told and retold that. What do you do to make it fresh? Do you make just a straight up action movie? And you can do that. I mean, there's still great ones like, the John Wick films and, the Mission Impossibles and stuff like that are straight up action movies, and they're great. But if you're trying to, they also have huge budgets. Everything Everywhere all at Once, it's incredible what they did considering the budget they had. Their special effects teams is a small team of absolute wizards. They're incredible. And so that one really took a lot of aspects of different genres, different types of stories, and wove it into such a unique experience. And so, to a certain extent, in a much smaller way, that's kind of what I was trying to do with mine is, not make something that felt confined, and also a bit of a throwback to movies I loved growing up, films that really inspired me, in that early to mid 90s. Obviously a huge influence that time was Tarantino with Pulp Fiction, which, how do you classify that film? Is it a drama? It's got dark comedy in it. You also had ones like California with Brad Pitt and Juliette Lewis and David Duchovny, which it's a movie about a serial killer, but it's also got some of the funniest dialogue I've ever heard. It's creepy, it's thought-provoking, it's all of that. You had Natural Born Killers, you had Freeway with Reese Witherspoon, which is one of my all-time favorites, and it's absolutely hilarious. Like her, Brittany Murphy is in it, Kiefer Sutherland, and it's a retelling of Little Red Riding Hood, but done in a really gritty, nasty, just debaucherous story, and it's incredible. It's my favorite Reese Witherspoon performance. But I loved those types of films where they were also unclassifiable, but each one of them, they had really thoughtful ideas they were trying to explore. They had really memorable characters. They had one-liners in it that I will still quote to this day. And they were just an incredible experience. I kind of wanted to tap into that a little bit and bring that experience where, it felt a little bit looser, felt a little bit less constrained, and a little bit more free than just trying to make something very genre specific, or even really trying to do something that has like a, something I've done in both. I've done two films. I've done it in both of them where I leave them a little bit loose. It's not like the story is just a neat package. I like the story to feel a little bit more like life, where it's a little bit loose, it's a little bit sloppy, it's a little bit, you don't really have resolutions. You have character journeys and to a certain extent arcs, but they're not perfect. There's untidiness to it that I like to try and keep in my stories. And I feel like that's where that lack of genre also comes in, because none of our lives have one genre.
Right.
At least I
yeah.
hope so.
Totally. I think that's so right. Yeah.
Yeah, so for that, to tell a story that I feel is authentic, even about vampires, an authentic story that feels real, it can't really have a genre. And so I love that more films are doing that, like Everything Everywhere All at Once. There's so many of them now that are kind of hybrid genres.
Yeah, exactly. And just like you said, no one's life is one category, right?
Yeah.
I think now the audience are more eager to see like those hybrid type of thing. And like I heard them, they only took them like 38 days to shoot the whole film.
Really?
Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Wow.
And then I think that's like right before COVID started, but they got all the shots done.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that's like crazy, right? 38 days for film, like,
I mean, there's in single shots in that just me looking at them, like, that would take me so long to even figure out how to do that.
Yeah, they probably have good team like behind it, and very efficient. So like, Geoff, when you start writing like the script, normally do you start focus on story first? Do you focus on like character first?
Character, definitely. Somewhat like I have a concept of like kind of the world they're going to be in. And I also, then I start to figure out who the characters are. And this is going to sound weird, but I read a book of theology years ago that changed my creative process. It's called The Mind of the Maker by Dorothy L. Sayers. Amazing book, highly recommend it. But she was trying to explain the mind of a creator, God, as from comparing it to the mind of human creators like artists. And reading it as an artist, trying to improve my creative process, it really changed the way I saw things. And when she was talking about free will as a, theological Christian idea, of this idea of, if there's a God that creates us, how do we have free will? And she explains it in the book in a really interesting way. And it actually impacted the way I write, in that, much like she explains in the book, I create these characters, I create this world that they live in, the laws, the physics, whatever of the world that they're in. And then creatively, I kind of just set them free, and like, what would these characters do in this world? Okay, in this story, it's a story about this vampire named Ure, who 200 years ago, he was raiding a village and thought this one girl in the village was cute, took her as his bride. She's now in this modern world, has established her own sense of self, and has decided that she doesn't want to be with anymore and left him. And so now he's depressed, and he's trying to win her back. So I have that as like the basis, the concept, and now I've got these their motivations and who they are. Now just kind of creatively, what do they do? And then I write from that perspective of like, I'm writing from Yurie's perspective, I'm writing from Dario's perspective, and from all these different characters' perspectives. I let that sort of shape the story, and then there's a lot of editing after that. But that way, all their choices, it's not me. I mean, it is, but it's not. I like to think it's not me as a writer saying, oh, then he does this, then he does that. It's more of being in the mindset of that character and being in their world, sort of like a method acting, but for a writer. Is like you're in this character's mindset and you're just thinking in the situation, what would he do? What would he say? Where would he go? All that sort of stuff, and letting it evolve that way. And I feel like it evolves more organically. And I feel like my writing has really improved since taking that approach. The realism of the characters. There was one review of the film that I think was a negative one. Fortunately, they weren't Rotten Tomatoes certified. But they said something about that I actually really liked. They said it didn't feel like a movie made for vampire lovers. It felt like a movie made for vampires. And I actually liked that. I liked the fact that it wasn't something that to them it felt so real that it was like, well, only a vampire would enjoy this. Like I was and I'm like, that's a good thing. I want something like that.
So, because you kind of like getting the mindset of like the vampires when you're writing those
exactly
scene, right? So like, since you mentioned about it, like you really like focus on character development when you're writing script, like that's kind of how TV. They say, oh, TV. Kind of focus on character, film focus on story. Do you see yourself like start doing more like TV writing or creating more like TV shows? Because I know you're like huge film, like the thing like people say, oh, nowadays TV is a new film right now. Lots of TV writing kind of head towards the direction like a film, right?
It is, but there's something I read just the other day that summed it up, and I can't believe I'm spacing on the director that said it. It's one of my favorites too, and I can't believe I'm forgetting who it was. But they were asked about it because they don't do TV, and I want to say it was the Coens, but I could be wrong. One of the Coen brothers, but I could be wrong. Anyways, they said their issue with TV. They said with film you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. With TV, you have a beginning, a middle, a middle, a middle, a middle, a middle, and then you finally have to force an ending.
Right.
Or it sometimes gets canceled even before you can have that. And
till the end of the series, right? You have to sort of force yourself to end it. That's kind of like that show Lost. Do you remember?
Yes. Oh, totally. It just seemed like it kept going, and they just kept on finding ways to keep a story going. And that's honestly one of my biggest issues. There are almost no TV shows that I've ever actually gotten hooked on. Usually by the second season, I check out because I'm just like, it just feels like you're being strung along with a bunch of drama. And it's very rare that a show ever feels urgent or immediate for that long. It kind of just feels like I'm passing the time. And it's not a dismissal of the artistry or the craft or the talent that goes into it. There's some amazing shows, and even some of the ones that aren't necessarily amazing, they're still really well written, really well crafted. But to me, and this is totally a personal thing, obviously a ton of people love TV. For me, like I said, by that second season, I feel like I'm just wasting time, and I want to just move on, and I want to get back to real life. And
you feel like they're supposed to be like ending. Like a chapter.
And so like a serial or serialized shows I enjoy where it's like, whether each show kind of wraps up neatly, like I can check in for a half an hour, then check back out, or something that is I can't believe I'm forgetting the term, but where it's like, one season is sort of the entire show. Totally spaced on that word. But anyways, there's great ones like that. There's even a couple stories I would love to do in that format where maybe do it over the course of 8 or 10 episodes. But there's a beginning, a big middle, and an end. But some stories need that. Biopics, stories about somebody's life, that's a great way to do it. Or a historical piece where, there is a lot of detail you want to get into. But I do feel like a lot of TV it has a lot of padding. They take stories that really shouldn't be more than 2 hours long, and they extend them for 8 hours or 10 hours. If you have something like George R. R. Martin's, Game of Thrones novels that are 1,000 some pages and they go on forever, like you can turn that into a great TV show. Again, historical things. There's a lot of things you can do with that. And there's shows that have done it well. I mean, obviously Breaking Bad is well done, is incredibly well done. One of my personal favorites was God, I can't believe I'm spacing on that. I'm so bad with names. It was I'm totally spacing on the name. That's terrible.
Game of Thrones.
No, it wasn't that one. It was has Christian Slater is in it. It's the one about the hackers. Oh my goodness. Totally spaced on the name. That's terrible. It's literally like the one show I've been obsessed with. Mr. Robot. There we go.
Oh yes, I do love that show.
Oh, it's so good.
Mr.
Yeah.
Robot, yes.
That one hooked me from the very beginning, and each season I watched it straight through, and I just love the way that each season it built this narrative, and then the next season completely destroyed it, and like showed like this whole another level to it, and the next season a whole another level to it. And it was so phenomenally well crafted, so well shot, well acted, everything about it incredible. So I'm not dismissing the genre of TV. There's some great stuff, or the medium of TV. There's some great stuff in it. For me as a storyteller, unless I was doing like based on a true life story, I don't have any in me yet that I feel like would merit being a season long or multiple seasons long. Obviously, team of writers, you might be able to, you could probably find a way. But yeah, for me as a writer, that's a lot of commitment as a writer. I want to make a tight story. I want to turn that into a film and let people enjoy that. And, I'll let better minds do like the big stories.
Yeah. So like there are some like pretty good like mini series these days right now. Like
Miniseries, that's the term.
Miniseries. Yeah. Nowadays it's also very popular, right?
Yeah. And there's some great ones too.
Yeah.
Really good.
There are some like great miniseries. I think that's kind of like the whole the streaming service is changing a lot. People don't go to movie theater, watch movies anymore. They'd rather just stream, watch those series, right?
Yeah, unfortunately. Not necessarily that theaters are the only way to do it. More from the business perspective, the streaming model you see it a lot in what's happening with a lot of the consolidation of these platforms. There's a very finite amount of money that comes into a streaming platform. You can only get so many subscribers, and it's made it very hard for films, especially films on the fringes, to do well, to survive. And I won't go into how, but I actually got to see some numbers from like Amazon originals and what the production companies are getting for them and their quarterly reports, and it's harrowing how small those numbers are, and what that's going to do for original stories is to me scary, because one of my favorite writers, William Dereshowitz, wrote a piece called Curtains, and the premise of it was that great art is created by great audiences. That without an audience that supports the arts, great art can't survive. There will always be artists trying to make it, but without audiences to support it, it can't survive. And so in this world where it's all about streaming, it's much more, the model is just creating content for content's sake. It's not necessarily nurturing a story. You hear all the time like shows getting canceled in their first or second season. They're not given time to survive.
Yeah. There's too many content out there these days.
Exactly.
Right? It's very saturated.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's very much about star power, if you can get a name attached to it, and then it's also about bankability, which, you know, that's great for entertainment. I like to differentiate between entertainment and art. I feel like entertainment is giving an audience something that they want. Art is trying to give them something they didn't know that they wanted. And that is a risk. You know, sometimes you're going to create art that they didn't want and they never will want or don't want for a long time. You know, there's a lot of classic films that bombed when they first came out, but they found an audience through video rental, or, you know, Blade Runner is a perfect example,
Right.
you know, of a film that really found its audience over the years. And so how do you do that in a market where stuff gets buried by the algorithm after the first week of not performing? And, you know, it's so hard for films to get a grassroots sort of audience when, if they don't hit right away, the algorithm just buries them and puts 20 more films on top of them. And then the next week, 20 more films on top of that. And the next week, it's, you know, my first film somehow, it didn't do much when it first came out. It took it 4 years, and it was through word of mouth. It finally found an audience and did really well for a while there. And now it's kind of been buried again, but it at least did well for a while.
Oh yeah, I remember I watched that on Amazon. Yeah, it's definitely like the type of film you need to find your own audience, right?
Yeah.
Type of the film. So
Exactly. And so that's, I guess, my concern with, it's not, I understand people not wanting to go to the theater. It's really expensive. It's not necessarily convenient. Some of the theaters don't do a good job of projection, or with TVs and sound systems in homes, it can look just as good, or at least comparably good in your home.
actually, people don't like to go out anymore. I think that's another
That too.
Antisocial thing going on right now. People just want to be on their phone all the time.
Exactly. And honestly, I'm guilty of it. I do love to go to the theater, but I like to go to the late night screenings where it's like me and two other weirdos in the whole place.
Yeah, because you don't want other people surrounding you, right?
Yeah,
I totally understand.
Like I'll do that for certain places, like the New Beverly. I'll go to that one and see like a second run, or and it'll be packed, or, you know, the Arrow Theater, some of the art house theaters, art house or second runs or that sort of thing. I'll go to those, but for like the big, when I went to see the latest James Bond, or God, I went and saw Moonfall, because I had to see it. It's Roland Emmerich. I've seen all of his movies in the theater. I had to go see it. It was garbage, but I loved it.
It's more like entertaining type
Oh
of
yeah.
thing, right?
I mean, it's even barely entertaining. It's so ludicrous. It's one of the most insane films I've ever seen, but I kind of loved it. But yeah, I went and saw that late at night. There were literally 4 people in the theater, including myself, and, you know, it was this huge theater with a giant screen, and you're getting like almost a private show. It's great.
Yeah.
I felt bad for, you know, the filmmakers, the investors, anyone, you know, the actors who were hoping for residuals. You know, I feel bad for them. But for me as an audience member, it was great.
Yeah, like, say, like, for you as a filmmaker, like, you know, what's the next step for you? Like, with like so much change in the TV and film industry,
Yeah.
do you still see yourself making films, or are you going to like start getting into making like miniseries or doing something different?
It's a good question. I've kind of dabbled in some different stuff. I mean, I've done everything from web series to, I've done a couple of those. I've done, you know, still doing music videos, of course, because I love those.
By the way, I have to say you have such a good eye.
Thank you.
Like for like, you know, those kind of, I think music video, like commercial stuff, fashion video, just like some people, they could have the best equipment, right? They could not get any single good shot. I think being a good director, cinematographer, you just have a really good eye to capture the moment, right?
Thank you.
Storytelling there. Yeah.
Really fortunate in that regard. One of my best friends is who shot a lot of my early stuff is, you know, now one of the top cinematographers in the industry. And so I learned a lot from him. I mean, he shot Frey, my first feature, but he also shot a lot of my early music videos and pretty much everything I did. I mean, we even made films together in high school. So it was like I learned a lot from working with Jaron. And then I also fell into the fashion world early on and working under some top photographers. So learned composition, lighting, and even just how to work with talent. You know, when you're That was really great to learn, really see how somebody at that level works with talent. Sometimes you're working with, they would be working with big name talent, and so there's some politics that goes into it, sometimes some ego, whatever it may be, but just seeing like these exceptional photographers who not only had the artistic craft but also the on-set skills to work with people, and so that was a really valuable experience. So yeah, I feel very fortunate that I had those two. I had Jaron as kind of my mentor in a way, even though we're same age, went to school together, but he's always been such a high level. He was really the one that I learned so much about the artistic side of it from, and then the style, the glamour, the more commercial side from these amazing fashion photographers. So very fortunate in that regard. Thank you.
Yeah, Jeff, you're such a true artist. I always respect what a true artist you are, and you kind of never compromise your vision as an artist, and then you're such a great, humble kind of person as well. Like, I feel like, people always say, uh, how you are as a person reflect you are as artist as well, right?
Yeah, which in relationships, I've always tried to just say, like, if you want to understand me, just watch my films. They're usually about they're actually not usually, they all are about somebody who feels completely alienated from society and is dealing with depression, and basically is just a weird outsider. And I'm like, well, that's kind of what you're in for.
Yeah,
And
I think that is like a filmmaker. That's how you tell a story. That's your voice, right?
it really is.
Yeah.
And I feel like so many artists are that way. And again, William Dershowitz summed it up really well. He said, an artist by their very nature is full of doubt and ends every thought in a question. Whereas a salesperson by their very nature is full of confidence and ends every thought in an exclamation point. And so much nowadays we're asked to be both, with social media and self-marketing and self-branding. We're all supposed to be pitching and marketing and pushing and selling our own art. But as an artist, how do you do that when everything you put out there, you're just like, oh, I could have done so much better, or this is wrong, or that's wrong. Like, you're always questioning and doubting, and yet you're supposed to sell yourself. Like, how do you do that? Some people can do it. I am awful at it.
That's why you just need a good manager help you take care of that part, right?
Yes, exactly. That's true. They have a very valuable role, that's for sure. To go back to your other question as to like where next, that's a really good question. I've done a lot of different things. I also feel like I want to stay true to just the medium that I feel the most attached to, which is narrative filmmaking. It's the one that I just feel like to me, it's the best form for my artistry. Whether that means I have any longevity in the future, I have no idea. It may mean I'm already obsolete. I don't know. But I also feel like if I constantly try to chase what I think is the next big thing or what I think I should be doing, I'm always going to be behind. If you're chasing something, you're just always behind it. Whereas if you just do what you want or what you believe in, and you do it the best that you possibly can, there should hopefully be an audience out there for it. There'll be people that see that honesty, they see that passion, they feel the love, and they feel the crap that you put into it, and hopefully create things that will impact enough people. And I see, honestly, my buddy Jaron, he's a perfect example of someone who has found that niche. He's a cinematographer, but he works with the director Rob Eggers, and what he and Rob have done, from The Witch to The Lighthouse to The Northman, and now they're doing Nosferatu, from their modest budget of, I think it was like $3.5 million for The Witch, to The Northman having a $90 million budget. Now they're doing Nosferatu with about half that. Some legit budgets. Yet they've always, with every film, they have stayed very true to their vision of what the film should be. They've never tried to make it into something that they feel like, well, because it's got this budget, I need to make it this, or this is popular right now, so I need to do that. It's like, no, every film feels like a Rob Eggers film. Every film looks like a Jaron Blaschke, film, and they have really found that niche for themselves. And I love that they are just so fully committed to that. Just over the holidays, I was hanging out with Jaron and just talking about it, and he's like, he's got such a distinct vision for what he wants to create and what he feels is worth putting into the world. And he had a quote, and he couldn't remember. Actually, he could remember. I can't remember who said it, because again, I'm terrible with names. But the quote was something along the lines of, "What takes time, time will respect."
Wow.
I love that.
That is so profound, like patience, right?
Yeah.
It's very important for artists as well.
It is, and to think of it not as like, oh, I need to put out a film now, I need to do another one, I need to do another one, but no, I've taken time between each of the films to really make sure it's the right film to tell, and then spent a lot of time crafting it, because I want it to be something that when an audience sees it, they don't feel like they were just given a product. They feel like they were giving an experience, and something that felt like the people that made it did their best to give you something of value, and not just some way to waste an hour and a half of your time.
Yeah. You can't rush art.
No, and
Right.
so for me, that's what it's about. Is like, I've got ideas, I've got scripts that that I want to get made, but I also feel like when I have the right one, it'll fall into place. It always has in the past. When I have the right script, all the pieces fall into place, and boom, it gets made. It happened with Frey. I did a short film. That one, just did well-ish for a short film, and decided to turn into a feature. And literally from that idea to actually shooting it, it was about a year, and it just kind of everything fell into place. Jaron's schedule was available. Jody, the producer, was available. The actor was wrapping up a show in London, and so he was available, and it all fell into place. We ended up making it work. Blood from Stone, similar thing. Like, I had the script done, started developing it, and it just fell into place.
Yeah, just like a comedy. It's about timing sometimes,
Yes.
right? Making a film. Yeah.
Totally.
That's awesome.
And it is a comedy. It's a comedy of errors a lot of time making a film, but it is. It's yeah.
All right, so Geoff, thank you so much for being in my podcast.
Thanks for
it's
having
always
me.
such a joy to talk to you, and then every time I talk to you, I just always feel like you kind of opened the door for me to see more charm of the filmmaking.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Geoff. I definitely hope one day we'll work together again.
Yes.
And,
of course we will.
Yeah, I love working with you. And do you have anything to plug or anything?
Obviously my two films, Frey and Blood from Stone, and also, of course, my buddy Jaron's films. If you haven't seen them, The Lighthouse is one of my all-time favorites. Absolutely perfect movie, masterclass in storytelling. So check out their films, and check out Kat's stand-up comedy. She's awesome.
Thank you, Geoff.
Yeah.
All right, so that's it.